Started. So, good afternoon, Facebook friends, revolutionaries, citizens of America and the planet. This is Jill here in Michelin, Belgium for my second day, and I'm very honored to be here today with two of the powerhouse women in the Belgian Greens. And what's really important to know is that the Green Party in Belgium, like in the Netherlands, like in Austria, are leading the way and are very much a part of national leadership that is standing up as the alternative to fascism, that is standing up with a vision of sustainability, justice, immigrant rights, and economic equality, and an education system that actually works for our younger generation. I'm seeing so much how the struggles that we have in the U.S. are exactly the same as the struggles here, small differences among them, but we have so much to share and so much potential power as we join hands across our borders and across the oceans to actually struggle for us, the 99%, to harness the power that we already have as our numbers, as so many social movements, into a unified political struggle. So with that, I'm going to introduce our first guest tonight, Mayram.
It's difficult to pronounce.
I want to say Marilyn, but it's not quite that. Mayram, who will tell us a little bit about her background and how she came to be involved with the Green Party. And also, she is the chairperson or the president, I guess you would say, the president of the Belgian Greens. So give us a little bit of your background, which is amazing.
Hi everyone out there. I hope one day I'll be there in real life to meet with all of you. It's a great honor to have Jill here today. My name is Mayram. It's actually a Turkish name. So I'm the daughter of Turkish immigrants who came to Belgium in 1974. I'm a Belgian now, second generation with Turkish background, and I actually got involved in the Green Party because when I was young, I was translating the weather reports that reported about a big nuclear blast in Chernobyl and how we couldn't eat our vegetables in our garden anymore, which were important for us because we come from a poor background and our parents grew their own food, their own vegetables. And I was puzzled by the fact that how is something that happened 1,500 kilometers, 1,000 miles away affecting our lives in such a devastating way? What is happening here? We can have cancer from it. And why do we allow technologies like this to be used if they are so destructive? So that's where my awareness started. And from my background, I got engaged in the Green Party in Belgium, in my local municipality where it didn't exist. We didn't have the Greens in our local community, and we kind of started it ourselves, and they needed someone on the list, and that was me. I never had any political experience, and from there I started my way up in the party without ever having worked on a cabinet, never being part of the normal elites that are usually into politics. And this is only possible in the Green Party because it's so open for diversity. And somehow I got here today, and we are working really hard with a great team of people to change the world, basically, to take back the power and give it to the people and make their lives better, to work for their aspirations, because my motto is we care for the planet because we care for people. The planet will be here long after we are gone, but if we want a quality of life for everyone on this planet, we have to care about the condition this planet is in. And that is basically what is moving me, because if we do not take care of the planet, the most vulnerable people will be the first victims. So this is a question of solidarity, of being fair towards one another, taking care of our future generations. I'm a mother now, so it is really puzzling me every day how we can make our lives better, because in the end this is a positive engagement. We really want to change the world for the better. We are taking the path of a new hope, not the path towards a past that has never existed. we are answering fear with hope, not with more fear. And after the Brussels attacks, this is a very clear choice we are making as Greens in Belgium, and which resonates amongst the public, because we see it in Austria, as Jill has told you before, we see it in the Netherlands, and we feel it. Today we had a big event here in Mechelen, and we feel that there is a big need for real answers for the questions that every one of us is struggling with. And I believe very firmly that the Greens have that answer, and that together we can tackle all these challenges that that we are facing as humanity and as the planet today.
Beautiful. Meirem did not tell you, but she is also a member of Parliament here in Belgium. And we also have with us tonight another new friend, Elizabeth, who will remind me what her last name is, because we've all just met.
That's right.
And she too is a member of Parliament and is especially active on the issue of education. So
that's right.
Tell us first a little bit about how you got involved.
I started working for the Green Party a long time ago, and I was responsible for building up groups, local groups, and I think we managed quite well. Even my own group is in a fairly small city, but in a rural area, and still we are standing strong as Greens as well. Whereas before, Green and the farmers, it was seen as a contradiction, and as if we weren't striving for the same things. People are starting to realize now, actually, ecology, saving the planet, and farming, we have to help each other. So we're getting better, we're getting stronger on a local level. But at the same time, I'm also a member of Parliament. I'm elected in the Parliament, and I do education, as you said, is one of the subjects I follow. So what we do there is really work on equal opportunities. We have a lot of migrants in Belgium, also refugees now, because we have a big refugee crisis in Europe, everywhere, and it poses some questions to our education system. But Belgium has a problem, the gap between people who come from a good background and are doing well in the education system, and then people from a poorer background don't have the same results, don't have the same choices in our education system, and we want equal opportunities for all children in our education system. So that's what I'm working on. And a second thing is the environment, pollution, air pollution. It's a problem in our densely built up region. So the link between environment and health for me is a really important one as well. Is something I'm working on also in the Parliament. So we really make the difference as Greens. We have had a lot of proposals, and sometimes you feel the majority, they're not accepting them, but a few months later they come with something which is quite similar and which is inspired by our ideas. And on this way we make a difference, and we weigh on policies, and that's what we want to keep on doing, I think.
I want to throw out a couple of just rapid fire questions.
Yeah.
So on the issue of the power of banks, because I know this incredible economic inequality in the EU, and sort of the power of the big capitalist banks to force their agenda and austerity on the less powerful countries, the Southern European countries, raises this question about who's running the show here. Is it being run by the kind of capitalist technocrats? How are you fighting that? Because I know the issue of the banking industry has been a key one for you.
Well, we are fighting that on two levels. We are fighting that on the European level. We have MPs that are elected and are members in the European Parliament who are working really hard on this issue because it's non-democratic. It is actually incredible that people who were never elected are deciding what Greece is going to do, and are taking very neoliberalistic programs and just imposing them on countries. So we find this incredible that this is possible, even possible in the Europe today, that we should have a more democratic Europe. So we are fighting really hard on that level to say, excuse me, this is not acceptable. But at the same time, on the local level, in the member states in Belgium, I myself have worked really hard on the financial institutions in our country after the banking crisis. We do have power. We saved these banks after 2008, and now, because we have done that, we have the moral authority to tell them what they can and can no longer do. But unfortunately, the powers that be, if you allow me to say that, are too intertwined with these banks. So the elites, they scratch each other's back. So what we have to do is take this power back and give it back to the 99% who is still living in outrage about what happened in 2008, and change these institutions and impose on them social and ecological new criteria. And this is possible. In the UK, there was a Climate Change Act that has passed the Parliament, where the Parliament has said, well, we have signed the Paris Treaty, as did the United States, as did Belgium, and every institution in the UK is obliged to tell us how they are going to help realize it, even the central bank. We have to make this possible all over Europe, because this way we can exert power over those financial institutions again, beginning with the most powerful with them.
Should we be moving to a public bank? Should there be public ownership of one or more of our banks? I think that
every country should at least have one public bank. We in Belgium now have a public bank because we saved a private bank from collapsing, and it has two parts. One is a bad bank, for which every single Belgian stands warrant for 4,000 euros per head for the next upcoming 40 years. So even my children, who are 6 and 9 years old, are still paying for a bank that was there before they were born, because of what they did, because of greed. And nobody ever had to stand trial for that, which is an atrocity. And at the same time, we have the good part of that bank that has become a public bank, and where the traditionalist parties and the right-wing parties want to sell this as soon as possible, as soon as it's profitable again. We say use it as a tool to make your society more just, to make the right investments in education, in healthcare, in your society. You have this tool. You never wanted it, but you had to save the bank. Now use it for the right purpose. And you see the countries that do this, that this helps to have funding cheaper, better and more effective in these areas in our society that now have a very difficult time finding funding because it's not too profitable. Right. So this is a very direct way to help your community.
And if I could jump in on a slightly different subject, but certainly related, and this is another area where so many of our resources are squandered, and that is in these wars that, you know, supposedly a war on terror, but how do you eliminate terror by dropping bombs and shooting it up with bullets? You may conquer one form of terror, but you create another, which is exactly what has happened in creating ISIS, and we have not really gained 1 inch on either the Taliban or on Al-Qaeda. We've only, you know, made the monster bigger, and yet for the U.S. this costs us more than half of our discretionary budget is being spent on our military. And what do we have to show for it? Failed states, mass refugee migrations, which Europe is being torn apart over, and worse terrorist threats.
And at the same time, they're really cutting funds for development aid, you know, and that's the only way to stop, I think, people from coming, people from fleeing, you know, poverty, which is the normal thing to do, you know. If you can't feed your children, if there's no hope for you, if you're the first one to suffer climate change and so on, you know, we should be helping them with development aid money, and that's the first thing to be cut, also in Belgium, also in Europe.
So how does this play out? You know, in the Belgian Parliament on these questions, you're being pressured now to buy some F-35 jets, and as I understand, also the replacement parts that come with it, because it's known that this is a failure, system failure waiting to happen in this lousy boondoggle. How are you handling this pressure to fork over the money from your schools to these warplanes?
Well, there's a saying in Belgium, the elephant in the chamber, and it's just by pointing out the elephant that's in the chamber where everyone is trying to avoid that it's there, and saying, well, excuse me, but how can you say that these people don't have a right to come to Europe when at the same time you are selling European weapons to Saudi Arabia that is bombing Yemen? Why is Saudi Arabia, who is exporting a very twisted interpretation of Islam, which is very different than most Muslims who are very peaceful are seeing as their religion today, why are you helping them to transfer it to the rest of the world, impose it on the Muslim community, who is much more diverse? At the same time, I'm sorry, but ISIS came from Al-Qaeda, which came from getting into Iraq, which was not a question about human rights or Saddam Hussein, but just about the oil. Let's be clear, let's stop the hypocrisy. The Middle East knows this, we know this. Let's be very clear and stop these kinds of wars that are only started because our needs for fossil fuels. So let's make that shift towards renewable energy, so we don't need dictators fueling us anymore in Europe, but also abroad. And let's stop these kinds of bonds with the wrong regimes, and let's choose for the human rights, which we are always talking about and using with words, but when the deeds are needed, like Europe right now helping refugees, we flee from them. So there's a big giant elephant there, and we need to address it, and we need to say, well, let's stop selling these weapons to Saudi Arabia, who is oppressing people. Let's stop funding these wars, which are actually making the situation for the local people more horrible. Let's stop by engaging in programs which only revert to making the monster bigger, and let's just face the fact that this kinds of roles that we have been playing for the last decades should finally stop, and that we should assume our role as society, who not only say they care for human rights, but also make it true towards people fleeing from poverty, fleeing from violence, what we see in Syria, or intolerable cruelties. And now, how many years is the war going on there? How can I explain this to my children that we stood by and looked at it and could do nothing because we made such a mess of that
Everything
place?
is in function of our export numbers, you know, and it's a big thing, and we export everything, and we don't even stop exporting weapons from Belgium, but other products as well, you know, like milk, for example, is going from Europe to you know, African countries, and then you see people there not being able to sell, not be able to do farming, you know, getting poorer and poorer, having to go to the cities and then not making money, so fleeing from Africa to Europe. So we have to rethink the way we work and we do economics, I think. It's a really important one.
Does the military budget play into your role in Parliament? And are you able to...
That's the parliament where I'm at. But what we are advocating is a shift from the budget towards F-35s, towards social programs, towards prevention, towards developing countries, helping them develop so that people don't have to flee. So what we are saying is, we are not naive. If peacekeeping requires sometimes intervention, but it starts with peacekeeping. And if we are cutting the funds for peacekeeping and giving it towards warmongering, then we don't have the necessary balance anymore, and the balance is lost. The balance is
but the populist parties and the majority now, they've made big cuts, and we've had some really good education programs. I mean, mainly focusing in some really good countries, and they've had budget cuts
women's rights as well,
30% now, because I'm involved in one of them, and it's really painful to see they're having to shut down programs that were really doing good. So. And the money's going to the new airplanes and the new...
and Belgium used to be really good at mining, at exploring mines. So in an area that had been devastated by war, we had some of the expert mine trackers who could track the mines that were still in the soil and remove them. And they have cut this budget.
Landmines.
Landmines, indeed, which have a lot of casualties each year and cluster bombs and things like that. So they were really good at cleaning up the mess after the war to prevent it from exploding amongst the general public, amongst children and people working on their farms. So they have cut these programs to start buying large military devices under the pressure of the United States. People like Trump saying we have to be amongst the real strong countries, and we have to do our part. Whereas we say, well, the world really needs people now that protect the ordinary people, and at the same time help them get their lives back on rails, and remove these landmines. And why throw that away if you have such an expertise in that area to go and be one of the Rambos in the field. And this is a choice that the right-wing parties and the populists make in our country, and we are fighting that choice. And actually the general public agrees. They say, why spend so many billions of euros on 10 F-35s if we can fund a lot of social programs, if we can use that money just to tackle a lot of issues that are happening here and in the developing countries. So the questions are being raised, but they don't listen, and that is something we have to make them listen. We need the critical mass so that they can no longer avoid these questions.
And this is why the power structure worked so hard in the US to silence this conversation, because few people know the reality that more than half of our discretionary budget in the US is being spent on the military. And in fact, almost half of your income taxes are spent on the military. And if you look at the US discretionary budget, so it's not like Medicare and Social Security, which we pay for out of our employment taxes. That's separate. But if you look at where our income taxes go, more than 50% is going to the war. And what are the war and the military? What is the number 2 expense? Once you get down from the military is number 1 at 54%. The next biggest line item is 6%. If you can believe that. We go from 54% on the military to just window dressing on housing, on health, on a number of other things that, you know, it just makes people's jaw drop. And people will not support this when they know that we are being robbed blind in order to put money really into the military-industrial complex, which is profiting as an industry by destroying the planet. So
and lives.
Because
there's a moral question that, because we have to make visible what this industry is about, and that's why we have to raise this question of what are we selling to, whom are we selling to, what are the casualties, what does this mean in terms of misery?
To connect the dots here between the immigration crisis.
Yes.
What is causing the immigration crisis?
Yep.
It is directly a consequence of the war,
Yes,
and then also some economic practices and poverty. But, you know, the biggest driver here are the wars. So we can fix this by simply standing up and doing the right thing, and also by working across borders, I think, and across the pond here, that as social movements and as a global green movement, we can make the right thing happen. The power to do that really is in our hands more than ever. This is both a moral imperative and an incredible historic opportunity. So it's great to be here tonight with these powerhouse women from Belgium, and I think this conversation will be continued. So thank you all so much for being a part of this.
Bye.